I did my research. Admittedly, it was not professional level research, but I did do some at least. In the midst of my investigation, which mostly consisted of watching some YouTube videos and reading a bunch of Reddit questions, I found something that caught my attention. For some reason, people on the internet didn't seem to see what I saw, and I kept wondering why the answer was so elusive to many. But then again, it was something so subtle. Maybe it didn't matter as much as I thought it mattered, or maybe what I saw wasn't the magical answer I thought it was. Let's take a look. In my research, I found much of what was obvious. The story is genius for doing so much character development in a difficult amount of space, and the plot was incredibly engaging for a novella slash short story, whatever it was. Won Shai Lu, the main character, is captivating as she is lawful good, and her relationship with old man Gautona is endearing as newfound family. Because it clearly was. And if you haven't read it, now you know. But let's face it, if you're here, it means you've read it. Either way, if you've not, Shai seems to be one of the most beloved characters of the Cosmere, as is the novella itself. To clarify though, everything was pretty good in all aspects according to internet critics, so don't come back to get me because I said Shai is lawful good and you think otherwise. Because she is not morally grey, she is lawful good and I will die on it. Well, to be honest, I didn't find anyone actually saying that about Shai, so maybe we're all on the same page. But since we're talking about Shai, let me introduce what will most likely be a backdrop many won't notice, because that's just how it is. People listen to videos more than they watch them, so... Also, I cannot pretend I have more time to edit this than I really have, so there you have it. You'll be seeing a time-lapse of Shai as I imagine her to be. Back to the discussion. I would like to mention this if anyone has not read it yet, as I risk confusion otherwise. The story follows Won Shai Lu, a woman who specializes in forging works of art. But this is no natural forging, this is magical forging. Part of the greatness of the story is getting to discover this magic system, so I won't spoil much, but she can imitate works of art by stamping common objects with magical seals to turn them into masterpieces. The way it works and how it branches out will be up to you to discover. Either way, she is caught by the royal guards as she is about to steal some artwork, so she is put in prison for it. Her only way out is to comply with the demands of the Empire's council to forge the Emperor's soul. How that is possible and if she can do it or not will be on you if you pick it up. I did speak of this before, but the most wonderful thing about this story is how it explores character in a limited amount of pages. The highlight of the story is how the relationship between Shai and one of her captors develops as they form a bond almost like family. To be honest, it isn't quite like family, but it does bear a resemblance to it. I won't really go into detail or else I'll give too much away. But you get the point. Sanderson can get a captor and their prisoner on pretty good terms quite easily. But maybe the one thing that stood out to me the most, besides the intriguing plot and the, once again, endearing character development, was the discussion that could be had from the story. I can't say I know Sanderson's writing to the fullest, but it did seem like a more introspective book that might not be common for Sanderson, and that clearly appeals to me. Introspective equals more philosophical themes, so introspective equals something I like. In terms of the themes it tackles, I found someone who compared the Emperor's soul to Frankenstein in the creation of artificial life and how morally right or wrong it is. I also found comments about how it tackles the nature of the soul, how if there's an artificial soul created, would the result still be the original person or would it not be them anymore? And yes, depending on your perspective and what's important to you in the first reading, it could very well be about all of that. But to me, when I read it, though it did make me question all of the above, the central point was something else. It was a discussion about art, and forgery is the central theme of it. What is considered art? Can forgery be art? And things of that nature. But putting it like that could sound like a downgrade to some, when it comes to themes anyway. Even if I would like to have people care about art as much as I do, many do not give it the importance it deserves. So I guess to some it could sound like a downgrade. Maybe it doesn't, but I assure you combine all themes together and you've got something pretty interesting. It is mostly about art, but given the gravity of the situation, it makes the discussion go up a notch. But if you're here, you might already know this. Then what did everyone miss? Probably missed, of course. From here on, there will be spoilers because I cannot go too deep into the themes or the story without talking about the details. I do recommend you read it if any of what you've seen on YouTube has caught your attention. I was pleasantly surprised by it, if I'm being honest, so super recommended. Off you go. Okay, now that we can talk about said details, what many people could have missed is the answer to the question Sanderson poses during the novella. But once again, before we see what the answer was, I want to go over the question I saw, because it could still be different from what you might be thinking. Yes, this question is about art, and yes, it is about a soul and the act of creating artificial life, but let's try to put it into words and narrow it down a bit. Though it may look like I want to reduce the story to just one theme, because I'm inclined to do that, it is not what I intend. This story has two themes woven into it, or maybe even more, but only one is explored to the fullest. And that one is the one I want to focus on. And no, it is not related to the soul or anything quite as directly involved with what makes a living being a living being. But why don't I think this story is mainly about the soul and artificial life when the word soul is present in the title? Well, because that theme was merely hinted at. If you remember, it was only mentioned a couple of times. Gautana questioned whether Ashravan's artificial soul would indeed be him, or if it would merely be a copy of the original. And the council debated the rightness of their endeavor right at the beginning of the book. But they pondered it just one time each. Then they forgot about it. And if you think about it, Sanderson doesn't present us with a perspective of the religion more than a statement thrown in to set the stakes. Nor does he show the complex discussions between the council members about the morality of the task. Neither do we get the Emperor shown fully after he is forged. We just get one scene, or maybe two, at the end, and we're left wanting more about this Emperor, to see how much he does indeed resemble the original Emperor or not. We're told some things about this new Emperor and we're shown Gautana's satisfaction towards him, but we don't really see much of a result. We just know there was a result. And a successful result, sure. But we don't really get the intricacies of it. If this conversation were to be inclined towards the nature of the soul and the morality of creating artificial life, we would have probably started with the Emperor's soul already created, rather than the process of creating it. In this instance, the most important thing for the discussion is to have a final product to conclude things on. Ashravan should already be ours to observe for us to see the consequences of not having a real soul or of resuscitating him. It should not be limited to speculation, as it will remain speculative. And that's how it was. We speculated about the rightness or the wrongness of creating life. We speculated about the Emperor being himself or not, but we did not get many reasons to believe it is wrong or right to create life. We did not get a point of comparison between the original Emperor and the new one. We do not get enough information to reach any conclusion, nor do we get an examination of what those two questions even mean. Why is it wrong to create life? Why is it right? What makes a soul and what doesn't? Does a soul give us individuality or does it not? There are too many questions left unexplored here, which leads me to assume this was not the theme Sanderson wanted to tackle. They are natural questions one might have when confronted with a situation like this one. To forge a soul for it to be good enough to fool people has those two themes implicit in it. The copy of the soul must be as good as the original, and forging a soul implies bringing the Emperor back from the dead. However, we are shown the process of the creation, not the result, not the aftermath, the process. I think Sanderson was smart enough not to go that route because exploring those two themes would take a full book at least. And emphasis on the at least. There's too much to be said on the soul and what makes life possible that I'm sure it would have been too much for a short story. Or that is what I would want to believe. I bet there are writers out there who can prove me wrong. I shouldn't talk in absolutes, you know. But alas, we're here, and he did not delve into that. So, returning to the conversation about art. As with any conversation, we get two perspectives. The first is Shai's perspective. She is a master forger. She is one of the most talented ones there is, and she revels in her art. She feels proud of her vocation in life, and she sees no wrong in what she does. Whenever she forges her own soul's windows or her bed, we see how much she cares for the art she does and what she thinks is beautiful, what she thinks art is. We empathize with her, with how she views the world. We can feel her passion, feel her drive. And this is why I don't believe Shai is morally gray. She doesn't forge to get rich or to antagonize gullible people. She forges to feel she has power, to feel people admire her work as if it were from a renowned master. Yes, it's not the most elevated of reasons, but she never does anything to hurt people. Save for maybe the blood sealer, but wouldn't you? I mean, if I were to die in just a couple of days, I would be desperate, as I'm sure Shai was. But going back to the main point, Shai has this positive perspective about forgery and art that we can empathize with. She is the point of view of the discussion that challenges preconceived notions we have surrounding the main topic. And to have a perspective that challenges, we need another, more traditional one. That is Gautonas. He is easier to understand because he embodies all we have been taught all our lives. He's a righteous person, always focused on doing the right thing. He has a view on art, a strict view on art. Art to him is defined by original artwork. Something other than that is a crime. Though he is presented as this very conservative man with rigid moral values, he is the easiest to understand of the two. Keyword, understand, not empathize. We have been taught that stealing is bad. Copying artists is also bad if you don't know how to copy, and making a living out of selling replicas of another artist's work is outrageous. You know, it kinda has happened already with AI art, as there are a bunch of people scamming other people with AI pictures. So there you have it. But yeah, if you try to copy another artist, you don't ever make the same artwork. You take elements to build your own. That's what we've been taught. We are not Gautana because we have many other things we might be more flexible with, but we understand what he fights for and why he thinks Shai is a criminal. As much as we think the billionaires who created AI are criminals. Yes, not only for that, but that's beside the point. So there you have it. We have two opposing views on what art means. To one, it is the rigid view that art is original, and to the other, a much too flexible perspective on that. However, there is something underlying in what those two perspectives propose, and I think this is where we can use art as a vehicle to say something else. If we strip these characters to their bare bones, we can find a more generalized but more philosophical debate. A debate about truth and deception. Gautana embodies that truth as he's genuine to a fault. He is being cast out from the council because he is unbending in said truth, while Shai is his polar opposite. She uses deception as a way of life, not only to make ends meet, but to find a sense of satisfaction with herself. Shai is prideful to a fault as well because she thinks she can change the nature of reality. So modest, isn't she? If we take a look at what transpires in the book, when Ashravan wakes up from the dead, all plans turn out for the better. Ashravan still has the crown, and Gautana serves a better emperor, which means forgery was the solution they had been looking for. If the question of whether Ashravan's soul was considered a work of art would be the main one, it would be solved by Gautana's own feelings about Shai's work. Not for the future or for the emperor. These were the tears of a man who saw before himself a masterpiece. True art was more than beauty. It was more than technique. It was not just imitation. It was boldness. It was contrast. It was subtlety. In this book, Gautama found a rare work to rival that of the greatest painters, sculptors, and poets of any era. It was the greatest work of art he had ever witnessed. In the end, Ashravan's forged soul is art to Gautama, the unbending Gautama. Does this mean he accepts forgery now, though? We could partly conclude that some forgery can be considered art, as Gautama does think Shai's work on Ashravan was a masterpiece, so at least some of Shai's perspective must have stuck. Concluding all forgery is art might not be, as we only get Gautama to bend his principles for Ashravan, but we get an open-ended question about art on its surface. This conclusion, although true, isn't all there is. If Gautama represents truth and Shai represents deception, the question now is another one. Is truth always better than deception? And I think this is the core of the Emperor's Soul. Yes, it does involve art in the question, but it goes far deeper than that to expand to all matters of life. Is truth better than deception as a generalized rule, and does this apply at all times? I think this is part of what people are missing. The Emperor's Soul involves so much more than art and its central themes, but it is not quite centered on the soul and all of that. It is more of a philosophical theme that goes in another direction, whether Sanderson intended it or not. The other part I think people miss is the answer to said question. Across all I've read from my research, there was always something in common. Okay, fine, it was just one comment, but it stood out to me, so it counts. But yeah, Sanderson offers no answer, supposedly. Sanderson does offer an answer. And to find it, let's go back to the ending of his story, when Gautama is reading the book Shai gave him, which explains the process she went through to create Ashravan's soul. He destroys the book, covers for Shai, and he marvels. He marvels because what Shai created was what he had always wanted to see in Ashravan, and Shai was genuine enough to admit she thought this was the true Ashravan. The true Ashravan was not moved by greed or corruption. He was moved by the desire to change things for the better. It was about the process of Shai getting to this result, and why this result had to be the only option. Gautama admired what Shai was able to accomplish. We don't know if he changed his view on forgery as a whole, but at least we know he accepts it in this form. He accepts Shai and understands her point of view. He protects her when it matters most, because he got not what he wanted, but a better version of that. It all depends on what that deception is meant to do and what it means, but also how you do it. It's the why and the how. What does it show? What does it express? What ideas emanate from it? And how does all that get done? From AI, if you were to consider it, we don't get much of an idea or a meaning, nor does it evoke much in the observer, and we don't get any substance with the how either. We just get the underlying picture. AI is there to replace artists, or workers in general, or to reduce production costs, as some might say. But this is the answer we are getting from the Emperor's Soul. That it depends. We might not recognize it as an answer because we have always been taught to choose either black or white. This is partly the reason why we get such an extensive number of laws, because that's what's absolute. If we deviate, it's not allowed, regardless of circumstances. Black or white. Sure, some might say there is room for wiggle among those laws, but that also depends on the moral values of a judge or lawyer when interpreting the law. It is not as open for dialogue as we think it is. In this black and white structure we've been taught is a false dilemma. Yes, it's literally called a false dilemma. It's described as a premise that erroneously limits what options are available. It asserts that one among a number of alternatives must be true. So, in the Emperor's Soul, settling on an answer for that false dilemma, would be either that always being truthful is the ultimate answer, or that deception isn't bad at all. But none of those apply. And trust me, believing in a false dilemma has worse repercussions than you might think. This disjunction is problematic because it oversimplifies the choice by excluding viable alternatives, presenting the viewer with only two absolute choices when in fact there could be many. And that is Sanderson's answer. That's why we're left to wonder what else could fit under that open-ended question, because there is no way to classify a particular situation without falling into a false dilemma. Truth and deceit could both have a place, but it all depends on why it's needed and how it's done. In The Emperor's Soul, the people needed a good emperor to care for them, and if forging was the way to accomplish it, then so be it. Whether that was the best option for the Empire would be another kind of worms I won't get into, but you get my point. Speaking in absolutes is foolish, and we still think we can do it. But now you know, if someone offers you a false dilemma, remember it's not real. It can't hurt you. Then again, all this if you didn't know what a false dilemma was. I don't want to be so presumptuous as to think no one but me knows, but I wanted to get it out there. Anyway, I present to you One Shy Lu. How do you think it turned out? And what did you think about the video? Let me know in the comments. Bye!